Lancashire, but Liverpool became so large they took it out of Lancashire and made it like a separate unit, because England's divided into counties, 48 counties. They have faffed around with the counties a bit, the English. They've been almost unchanged for centuries. Some very minor corrections in the 1880s. Then 1973, almost a revolution in terms of counties, chopping off a bit of this county, giving to that one. Rutland disappeared, it merged into a neighbouring county, Rutland, which is the smallest county in England, and on and on. So Liverpool is famous for many things. The Beatles, Billy Fury, who's the other one? Jerry and the Pacemakers. Anyway, so that is Birkenhead on the other side. And there's a little place called Wirral. Camel Laird's is a major shipbuilder. And you can see there these grey ships, the Liverpool Navy ones, but I've been told they're actually being dismantled. They're shipbreakers. They're still off the scrap, not being built up. Some big oil drums, well, massive oil drums, because so much was imported and exported. So it was a city of embarkation as well as disembarkation. So because we're quite close to Ireland, many of us came over here, settled in the Liverpool area, so we went a bit further inland to Manchester, as well as people sailing from Liverpool, coming from other places in Great Britain, and emigrating to the United States, Australia, places like that, very heavily bombed in the Second World War. And there's a statue here donated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to commemorate all those who took ship here for foreign shores. That would be late 19th century. Look at her hairstyle as well, little bun on top, not quite a pineapple. Anyway, so we were near one of the most iconic places in Liverpool, and look at the little boy playing with the crab. So perhaps I didn't get the ideal angle to show you that. Having to speak fairly loudly because there's a bit of a wind up. It's meant to go up to 40 miles an hour, so I trust that I'm still audible. And you can see it's a bit like one of those bridges in Paris. I forget the name of it. These lovers coming here to attach their locks to show that they're and anyway, we're quite far above the brine. So it's not foaming here because it's not too cloudy. Seems like the tide is going out. It's very much a tidal river. But just in case you consider coming here to take a dip, don't. Strong currents. We're well above the water. It might even be like 10 meters down from the water, so I wouldn't dive in, though I think it is fairly deep. That's why it's quite safe for ships to dock here. So by the 1980s, there was actually fairly little sea traffic coming in and out, and had been a bustling industrial port, because factories here and nearby have been sending their goods abroad, as well as things being imported. But the United Kingdom was deindustrialising. Liverpool fell into a terrible economic depression in the 80s. I mean, Northern England generally suffered, and so there was mass unemployment. There were many derelict buildings, and there were a lot of people who were drug-addled, unfortunately, a lot of crime. So the city had a bad time in the 80s, and many people blamed Margaret Thatcher's Conservative administration. And Michael Heseltine, a Conservative cabinet minister who was a One Nation Tory, he said something had to be done to Liverpool. He persuaded lots of leading business executives from London to come here, have a coach tour, explain how bad it was, and then persuade them to donate money to renovate the city. So anyway, it's a former warehouse and flats, restaurants, shops, museums, the Beatles Museum, there's because from the 17th century until the start of the 19th century, until 1806, 1807, if memory serves, this was a major entrepot for the slave trade. Not so much that people were taken here, but ships from here were sailing the coast of West Africa, where our own species was purchased, Homo sapiens, in huge numbers, forced on shipboard, chained up in terror, no idea where they're going, chained up for 3 hours a day in the darkness, living in their own filth, not allowed to go to relieve themselves. So taking the most inhumane conditions across the Atlantic voyages, which lasted typically 6 weeks, to the American continent. It could be South America, the Caribbean, could be what's now the United States, and sold into servitude and treated with most barbarous cruelty. So the satanic evil of slavery is something with which Liverpool was intimately involved. I'm happy to say, not pointing the finger at Liverpool. I'm not saying that they alone were guilty. People all over the United Kingdom participated in this, and many other countries, and yes, slavery has been around throughout recorded history. There's no reason to believe that it didn't exist before recorded history. I'm not saying that all Liverpudlians were involved in that, and yes, there were some brave souls who fought against it. But Liverpool does face up to this very bad chapter of its past when black people were treated just abominably. Anyway, so it's quite a multi-ethnic city now, and so sailors were coming and going, and it was a significant black community here even from the late 18th century. There's also Chinatown, one of the earliest Chinatowns here. There's not much of a South Asian community, perhaps curiously. There's a small Jewish community of which Ringo Starr was a member. Edwina Curry, or Edwina Cohen as she once was, the Conservative cabinet minister turned novelist, and so on. So it's been through urban regeneration, and the city's improved leaps and bounds. It's got 3 universities: John Moores University, Liverpool Hope University, as well as Liverpool University, so don't get them confused. It's got 2 cathedrals, which you might see a bit later. The Anglican Cathedral, which took decades to build, I think it's a Gilbert Scott creation. Curious anyway, so the Beatles first started performing at the Cavern Club, which still exists, though not in its original location, but on the same street, perhaps the most famous sons of Merseyside. And about to show you the Liver building, which is so often one of the part of the establishing shots of Liverpool, but this is not the angle which is usually shown. There it is behind me. It was some sort of insurance company built it. Okay, oh yeah, and look at this ship here in dry dock. I don't know anything about the history of that ship, but yeah, so very much a maritime city, though not many people are sailing to and from the city anymore. There are still ferries. You can get the ferry to the Isle of Man and to Ireland, so across to Dublin. I think you can go to Belfast as well, Stena Line. So yeah, so that's so much about Liverpool. Could go on all day. Liverpool Lime Street is the main railway station. The city's got its own metro system as well. So Liverpudlians, they're known as Scousers, or say I'm a Scouse, even a Scouse mouse. Apparently there's a type of soup called a Scouse, and that's where the nickname comes from, not sure. So let me turn around and show you a Stena Line ferry behind me. Do you see it there? The huge white whale there resting upon the Mersey. So yeah, it tends to be a blustery city because we're not far from the open sea. And the railway used to come right down here, so passengers could get the boat train, as in the train was going to connect to the ferry at the time. It was coordinated, and it didn't come right down here before. There was much more road transport before we had lorries and that kind of thing. But these railways right to the docks, they were pulled up by the 1960s. The beaching reports and all that. The beaching was commissioned by Harold Wilson's Labour government to rationalised rail transport because it was too expensive. It was losing so much money. It was in public hands back then. That's when he wrote his famous, or perhaps infamous, report Reshaping Britain's Railways in about 1963, and found that something like 80% of the traffic went on 20% of the lines, and shut down about 2/3 of the railway stations in the United Kingdom. So some of these are eminently sensible decisions, others more contentious. The United Kingdom has slightly changed some of these. So Richard and Judy, you might know that morning chat show with that married couple, Judy Finnegan, who's a Liverpudlian, and Richard Madeley, who's an ex-Essex boy. He used to be filmed in one of these buildings back here for years, and famously their weatherman used to stand on these islands. They were sort of tethered to the seabed, representing Ireland and Great Britain, and do the weather forecast and jump across from one to the other. And he once fell in, and once some sort of nude protester came along and exposed himself there. Okay, I'm not sure what this horsey is doing here. Anyway, that's enough from me. So I hope you've enjoyed your very brief introduction to the centre of Liverpool. I'll show you a few more things. I'm George from Ireland, and thank you so much for donations. I urgently need them to maintain this channel. If you want, and you sometimes send me messages on PayPal when you donate. Now, I've not mentioned any names. I will do if you want me to, but you might wish to remain anonymous. So the default setting is for me not to say your name. If you want me to give you credit on air, then I shall. It's GeorgeCallahan79@gmail.com. Callahan is spelled Callaghan, and it's all small letters. Thank you so much. Goodbye from Liverpool.